Hey everyone, I'm Joe. Today it's time for me to do a book review of the Embers of War trilogy written by Gareth Powell. This trilogy comprises of Embers of War, the name of the trilogy itself, Fleet of Knives, and finally Light of Impossible Stars. These three books were originally published in 2018, 2019 and 2020 respectively, and these are a science fiction trilogy, and it is classified under the space opera subgenre. If you know me by now, I do like space opera quite a bit. So first of all, a synopsis of the primarily first book, because of course the second and third books would be too spoilery to talk about too much depth here. So the books are set within a universe where humanity has risen into space and colonised these stars and multiple other planets, and we have space stations and various things, which is a very standard idea within science fiction, of course, because you need often a sort of larger sort of empire and a larger stage to set your plot lines on, especially with science fiction. This follows that formula fairly normally. We have advanced technology, medicine, we have obviously very fast spaceships that can go between star systems much faster than anything we have nowadays, of course, because it would take centuries and centuries now. That's been solved with a kind of a faster than light type travel, which is pretty standard. And overall, this is quite a good universe to live in, relatively speaking, because of course governments have become a little bit more open-minded and they're not so obsessed with murdering each other and creating war, although the wars and combat and conflict still exist, because of course there will always be certain individuals that want more than they really need ever, and this creates some pretty unpleasant and pretty disastrous situations. And of course the book starts in a rather interesting situation, because the book is based around the ship, a warship called Trilogy. This is a sentient AI or artificial intelligence ship. It is fully aware of what it is and what it's capable of. They were designed, there were more than one of them originally, to be very fast, hard-hitting spaceships in a war. That war is now over. Trilogy in particular, though, because it is partially biological as well as obviously electronic, it decided to quit being part of the Navy and the military, and it became part of essentially a sort of humanitarian aid organisation. And that's where the book starts off, because the Trilogy and its crew, which is a female captain and other crew members that I'm not going to talk about because they do change throughout the course of the trilogy, so I might give away spoilers there. They receive a distress call very early on about a ship in a relatively nearby system that is in trouble. Obviously they're humanitarian aid at this point, so they head off to help this ship in distress. Obviously what they find isn't entirely what they expected. Simultaneously, in another part of space, a military officer gets assigned the task of collecting and finding a poet, unusually, called Ona Sudak. He doesn't know why he's being told that he must find this female poet for. But he's military, he does as his orders tell him. So he goes off to try to retrieve her, and again, like Trilogy, things aren't quite what they seem, and indeed the poet's not, the organisation's not, nothing is as it seems, which is pretty standard, but it's done very well in that way. And frankly, the plot goes from there. I don't want to say too much, but obviously it is a large, grand plot, which is far more than the characters themselves and what they think they could ever be involved in. Of course, they think that they might get into a few bigger situations, but nothing on this scale. This is a scale upon the whole human race, frankly, which is pretty standard for science fiction and space opera in particular. And it's a very interesting plotline and one that I really enjoyed. So, first of all, the characters. This is a character-driven trilogy The characters are all really interesting and well written. They all have motivations that you can actually understand and empathise with. Obviously, the different characters, different people might find different characters to be more relatable depending on your background and your personal history and also obviously your personality traits and such. However, there is one flaw here, actually, which is a shame because obviously it's character driven, and that is the main antagonist character, or the bad guy character, starts off rather well with a motivation that, whilst it's still pretty messed up, at least you can understand why they are trying to do the various large amount of unpleasant things that they are trying to achieve. However, by the end of the trilogy, they have become almost laughable, which is a shame to say, because they have remained two-dimensional, at least I think, throughout the second and especially the third book, and that character doesn't develop in a very good way. They end up at the end of the trilogy doing the horrible thing that they're doing, almost irrelevant of the original motive they had, which was understandable, and now they seem to just be wanting to murder people just because they enjoy it and it's enjoyable and fun. So it's a flaw, but I personally think, but only a minor one, because that antagonist does change and more antagonists and more motivations for the greater plot does come into play though. So that character isn't the sole reason for the plot. She is the driving force initially, but only initially. The plot expands from that character, and in an interesting way, which I really think is interesting. And that is because the world itself, all the characters work and fit within this greater universe. Now, the world building is advanced enough, and the backstory and the history, for you to get an idea of how humanity has spread to the stars, how they've colonised things, space stations and such. But it's not done excessively so, because this is a character driven space opera. Space operas often are. This really is very much so. And the world building is done just enough to give you reasons to understand why the characters are doing what they're doing and for them to work within it. But it's not too heavy where you start to lose sight of the characters beneath descriptions of weird and wonderful science fiction worlds set on multiple planets and that sort of thing, which sometimes you do find in science fiction space opera. This doesn't. This is enough to be getting on with, and it's not overdone. The balance of world building and character development and indeed plot line is very, very balanced, and indeed that's what makes one thing very interesting about this trilogy, because I think it is a trilogy which is actually remarkably unusual, because all three books are almost completely balanced and completely even in terms of quality. Often with, I find, science fiction trilogies, one book will, not unusually, stand out slightly from the other, amongst the other two in terms of quality, maybe because of novel ideas and introduction of characters for the first time. They'll stand out a bit, and often there might be a book that gets a little bit bogged down sometimes with exposition and frankly world building and all these great ideas. Sometimes the middle book, but not always. Maybe sometimes it might be the third book. This trilogy doesn't do that. Each book has the really good focus of being character development with a certain amount of world development, but not too much, as I've said, with plot line, and it focuses it quite well. You've got an antagonist which is always there. Yes, the antagonist does have a few flaws, but other ones balance it out overall, and it's basically a very balanced trilogy in terms of quality and indeed writing, and indeed the writing is strong. None of the books are weaker than the others in terms of writing either. The writing is enough for you to understand what's going on, complex enough for it to be interesting, but not overdone. And one thing I want to mention about the writing is one thing that people often mention about Gareth Powell and this trilogy in particular, and that is often referring him and this trilogy to the culture novel by Ian M. Banks, of which, if you didn't know, I am currently reading my way through at the moment. Obviously, the culture novels and Ian and Banks are very iconic within science fiction. Powell gets referred to this for understandable reasons, because the way he develops the world and the way he develops the plot line is reminiscent and blatantly inspired by Ian and Banks. I believe Powell has actually said that he loves Ian and Banks. Rightly so, he's a very good author. But this isn't just him trying to do his own version of Banks. It's not him trying to copy it in any sense. He's inspired by it, yes, and your style often gets influenced in a fairly direct manner by what you love and what you get ideas from. But he's not copying it anyway. This is very much Gareth L. Powell writing in his style. He's not copying Banks, and frankly, I don't think it's that similar enough to really make a direct comparison in any sense. Powell is completely independent on himself. He's not relying on the idea that he's somewhat similar to Banks to sell himself. He's fully independent, and I think that's a very good selling point by itself. Some of us tend to be very much a case of they tend to, well, the published anyway, often refer to them in relation to other well-known authors. Powell doesn't. He can stand on his own, and I actually think in years to come people will be doing what I've just said, where they'll be referring other authors to him. He'll become a kind of a Banks figure by himself. Personally, I think he's actually strong enough writer for that to happen. And overall, that's pretty much it for this trilogy. Now, this overall is a well-written, character-driven trilogy with a good plot, interesting world building, and a very good balance, as I've said. If you've read this or you would like to read it, then please leave a comment. If you'd like to know more about it in any particular way, then of course feel free to ask. I'm always wary of saying too much about particular aspects, so of course I don't want to say spoilers, but I don't personally like excessive spoilers in reviews myself. I prefer to know the general idea of what the ideas might be and such, rather than individual plot points, but I will talk about virtually anything if you ask. And with that said, that is actually it for this review. All my social media links can be found in the description box below. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you another time. Bye for now.